What is up, ladies and gentle nerds? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and this is episode number 3 of the Rogue Deck Workshop, the show where we take an idea and turn it into a hopefully functional Magic the Gathering deck. And the reason I started this show was because I saw a lack of creativity when I was just playing on the ladder in Arena, and I thought it would be beneficial if we shared together the experience of building a deck and the thought process around looking at cards and seeing what could work because of the way they interact together, not necessarily because we saw a list somewhere. And so while we are going to be building a specific deck, ultimately what I want you to take away is the thought process behind looking at cards with a deck builder's mindset. And if that is of interest, well, we are going to dive into it right now. All right, so as you can see, we have the blank slate that we always start with. And today, what I wanted to build was something that I've been meaning to build for a long time, actually, and that is shrines. So if you're not familiar, the shrines are a series of enchantments that all interact together in cool, fun ways, and they're very, very powerful when you combine them. So, for example, the Sanctum of Calming Waters here is a shrine that at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may draw X cards, where X is the number of shrines you control, and then if you do, discard a card. So, at the very least, you're drawing one, discarding one, because you have Sanctum of Calm Waters. But if you have multiple shrines, you could be drawing 3, 4, 5, 7 cards, and only discarding one. That is huge, as I'm sure you can imagine. Sanctum of Stones and Fangs, for example, is also a win condition. So at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of shrines you control. 90% of the time, that's probably how shrine decks are going to win, is with this guy. So the thing about the shrine deck, or the thing about shrines in general, is they are all legendary, which means you can't simply stack 4 of the 2 colors you want and call it a day. They are actually legendary, so you can only have one of each on the battlefield at any given time. So having multiples in your hand is kind of a feel-bad, but at the same time, we want to get access to the shrines that are going to help us the most, but in a perfect situation, we'll get one of every shrine on the battlefield. And so that produces a really interesting and frankly bizarre deck construction challenge, because we want to be running singleton shrines, but we want to get them quickly and have access to exactly the ones we want. So the trick is going to be tutors, finding the shrines that we need that can get us the shrines. And they made a mega shrine, which is the one that is going to just tie this whole thing together, and that is Sanctum of All. So actually, as of this recording, I only have one of them. We're going to change that right now, and yes, I'm going to spend the 3 rare wild cards, because that is how important this card is to this deck. This is going to be the linchpin. So I have 4 in here because we need to see this card every single game, period, without question. We just do. And so the Sanctum of All, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library and or graveyard for a shrine card and put it onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. If an ability of another shrine you control triggers while you control 6 or more shrines, that ability triggers an additional time. So the biggest, most important element of Sanctum of All is its ability to tutor up shrines. Now, those aren't just any enchantments. It must be shrines. So as a result, we can now put in one of every other shrine. As long as we can get our hands on Sanctum of All, we're going to be fine. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, all the shrines are enchantments. Well, Idyllic Tutor is a card that we presumably have access to. Let's go ahead and remove that filter. Yeah, so we have Idyllic Tutor and Grim Tutor, both of which could theoretically get us Sanctum of All. And once we have Sanctum of All in play, Idyllic Tutor would allow us to fetch up another shrine in addition to the one that Sanctum is giving us. But I'm a little bit concerned about that, because I don't want to be spending 3 mana on fetching up a piece that needs to be consistent. I would rather we spend that 3 mana on something like Cultivate, because you might have noticed with Sanctum of All, not only do we need to find the thing, but we need to be able to cast it, because it contains, in its mana cost, 1 of each color. It's Wooburg. So what we need to do is we need to have a way to cast all 5 of those one of each color, hopefully on turn 5 or sooner. So the best bet is going to be, well, cards that can produce multiple colors of mana, or cards that can produce, or the cards that can fetch up lands that can ultimately ramp us into multiple colors of mana. So we have a few options there. One of the things that I think of immediately, so I mentioned cultivate. Let's go ahead and start there. Let's go ahead and just smash 4 cultivates in here, because this is an amazing card when you need to fix your mana. What it does is you search your library for 2 basic lands, reveal them, put one onto the battlefield, another in your hand. Simple, effective, it does the job, it does it very, very well. And so in that case, we need to be running enough basic lands to be making cultivate worth it. So as a result, that might be a bit of a challenge, because when we have that many sources, we're going to want to, or when we have this restrictive of a mana need, we're going to be wanting to run Shocklands and maybe even Trioms. And so cultivate is a potential, maybe it's not what we want, but let's start there. So the other thing that I wanted to look at was specifically in Historic. Now, before we go any further, let's at least put one of every single shrine in place. The reason that we're doing this in Historic is because there is a cycle of shrines. And do I not actually... Yeah, we're going to be seeing history here. So I'm going to go ahead and craft these right here, right now. We have a series of shrines called the Hondens. And I'm going to go ahead and craft 4 of each of these just because I have the wildcards to do it, not to flex or anything. But I figured, hey, might as well, right? At the end of the day, I can't imagine a world in which we would ever be putting all 4 of any of these into a deck, but you never know. We may find opportunities to use them in other contexts where having multiple enchantments might not be a bad thing. And yes, I know these aren't standard legal. These are historic. That's exactly why I'm crafting them. They're uncommons. It's cool. I'm not stressing about my uncommons. So at the end of the day, I want these Hondens because I have a soft spot for Hondens, is really what it comes down to. I've done my podcast, Overthinking MTG. I've done episodes about the Hondens. I believe that they are very powerful, very important, very, very fun, I should say, and I appreciate them very, very much. I think they are a lovely piece of the game's history, and the fact that we have access to 11 shrines and Sanctum of All is going to pop once we hit 6 or more, that's lovely. I think we're going to be in really good shape, and I like that a lot. Now, there are standard shrine decks that are running around right now with just the Sanctums that don't have access to the Hondens, and they are very powerful. They're actually working pretty well on the ladder. I've gone up against a couple of them, and man, is it frustrating. But in this case, we're going to be playing in Historic. So what are the decks that are currently dominating in Historic? Because that's something that we need to be aware of, because whenever we're constructing a deck, we need to build the deck that we want to execute, but we also need to have interactions so that the decks we're going up against can't be as effective as us. That's ultimately the goal. And we can do that one of 2 ways. We can do it by being super duper effective at what we're doing, which is what decks like Goblins in Historic do. The main focus is do what we do it super well, kill our opponent before they have an opportunity to set up their game plan. It works as long as you're super duper fast and execute. Other decks that are, more control decks, I mean, that's the biggest difference between aggro and control. A control deck is all about preventing your opponent from being effective and then being able to beat them in the end. So that's really what it comes down to. Well, what we're doing here is going to be something a little more on the control side, because with this is going to take a while to set up. It just is. There's no way around it. That is what it is. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to stave off what our opponents are doing long enough to get to where we want to go. And we can do that a couple of different ways. If we're going up against aggro decks, life gain is really important. So like a mono red rush situation, we definitely want to go up. We definitely want to deal with life gain. Or we want to be doing stuff with life gain. If we're going up against the Goblin deck right now, the biggest challenge with it is Muxus. Muxus and the Conspicuous Snoop, the ability to pull goblins off of the library and put them directly into play, is really, really powerful. And as a result, they don't need to draw cards because they can just get them. So cards like Containment Priest and Grafdigger's Cage that prevents cards from entering the battlefield from anywhere but the hand is really, really valuable to go up against that deck. Do we want to load those into the main board? Not necessarily, but do we want them in the sideboard? You betcha we do. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Before we go too far into that, let's take a look at the Hauntons themselves and identify what proportions we want for those. So, Sanctum of Tranquil Light, it's a 1-drop. It's a shrine that we can drop on 1. Now, that's tempting. That's very tempting. And you can pay 6, tap target creature. But this ability costs 1 less to activate for each shrine you control. So it itself is a shrine, so at the very least, at most, you're going to be paying 5 for this, one of which has to be white. So, all right, that actually is not a bad tempo play, especially later in the game once you have access to a lot of these. Because if your opponent is running a number of creatures, then all of a sudden you can use basically whatever white mana you have to just tap down all their stuff. That's really powerful, especially because the Hauntons, well, the shrines are expensive, but once they get online, once you have a decent amount of them set up, they're passive. You get all of the benefit on your upkeep regardless of how much mana you have available to you because they're just here. They're just doing their thing. So that's not nothing. That's actually really, really slick if you ask me. And actually my mind's whirring on a couple of different things we can do here, and I'm intrigued by some possibilities. So, but we'll get there. So I'm going to go ahead and add a couple more so Haunted and Cleansing Fire, you gain life for each shrine you control. Nothing wrong with that. Sanctum of Tranquil Light is ultimately the ability to slow down your opponent, which is going to be better later in the game to prevent the fatal swing rather than early in the game because of the way that the cost scales. But it is a shrine that we get to put down on 1, which is going to make our other shrines better if we can get access to it. They'll be better faster. So that's not nothing, but at the same time, I'm hesitant to double up or even add triple of those yet. Let's take a look at what else we need. So Sanctum of Calm Waters is a 4-drop. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may draw X cards where X is the number of shrines you control. Oh yeah, we talked about this. Drawing cards is huge. Getting access to cards, getting access to options is absolutely huge. And also, we're not afraid to discard our shrines because the Sanctum of All can pull them back up out of our graveyard later. So even a one-of shrine that we are going to need later, as long as it's not the Sanctum of All itself, we can just chuck it and we'll get it back. It's fine. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, we just draw a ton of cards and we can get this down on turn 4 at the latest because we are going to have to do some ramping here. No question about it. We just are. Haunted of Seeing Winds. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card for each shrine you control. Now, this thing does cost 5, but holy cow, is that ability insane. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put 2 of these in here for now, just because we are going to run out of deck slots. We just are. This is going to get insane real fast. All right, so Sanctum of Stone Fangs. 1 and a black. You drain your opponent for each shrine you control. This is incredibly good. It's incredibly good. It's incredibly powerful. It's our finisher. This is going to be what wins us the game. Because you are also gaining life there. So if your opponent is running aggro, if you get this down early, you're going to be gaining life. They're going to be losing life. So this establishes the clock, and it puts the clock in your favor. So I'm actually going to go ahead and put 3 of those in here for right now because I feel like that one is incredibly important for what we're doing. Haunted of Night's Reach. At the beginning of your upkeep, target opponent discards a card for each shrine you control. That could be good, but like we were saying with goblins, they don't need cards in their hand. And by the time you get this down later in the game, there's a really good possibility, like if you're going up against good old-fashioned mid-range stuff, they're going to have stuff in their hand, or they're not going to have stuff in their hand anyway, because once somebody's in top deck mode, Haunted of Night's Reach basically does nothing except count as another shrine. So we'll have one in the deck because, well, we should have at least one of every shrine in the deck because they're legendary and we need to get that count up. But at the same time, how good is it really going to be? So 1 is fine. Haunted of Infinite Rage. At the beginning of your upkeep, Haunted of Infinite Rage deals damage to any target equal to the number of shrines you control. That's pretty freaking slick. That is going to give us an opportunity to really mess up creature heavy decks. So we're going to be able to blow up creatures with that. I feel like this is really, really good. So I'm going to go ahead and put 3 of those in there, possibly. Let's go ahead and do 2 for now. We might do more later. So Sanctum of Shattered Heights. This is the standard legal version of that, where you can pay 1, discard a land card or a shrine card, and it deals X damage to target creature planeswalker, where X is the number of shrines you control. Now, this is an activated ability. So you can just pay 1 whenever and just do this. That's freaking slick. Your timing is not dependent on your upkeep the way it is with Infinite Rage. So that's not nothing. So let's go ahead and put 2 of those in there. So we have a total of 4 3-drop damage dealing shrines. So that's going to be really clutch and helpful in eliminating some of our early opponents. Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest. During your pre-combat main phase, you add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of shrines you control. Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest reads really, really well. I want to love this card. However, I don't, and I'll tell you why. It is a 3-drop shrine. It is in green. Green is very clearly an important color for us, and it does produce mana, so that's good. However, the mana is color locked to just 1, and since we're having to juggle 5 colors, that is a very strong, very real restriction. So if we get access to 7 mana because we have that many shrines, to be fair, if we have that many shrines, we're probably going to be in really, really good shape. As long as one of them is drawing us cards and another is dealing damage, we're going to be fine. But if we can get 2, 3, 4 mana off this thing, but it's color locked, we then have to really weigh our options and determine, okay, which colors are we going to need? To be fair, the shrines do all have a really heavy generic mana cost, so getting just a bulk of mana could still be valuable, no question about it. But I feel like there are better, more consistent, stronger ramp options, and we're definitely going to get into the ramp package and what that looks like here in a little bit, because that is incredibly important for this deck. We need access to our colors. We need them fast, and we need to have a lot of green mana, because let's be honest, that's where all the good ramp lives. So this deck is probably going to have a very heavy green mana base that can produce additional colors. That is going to be really where it sings. And Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest, if we get it online, there are certain games in which it is going to be a very valuable part of the equation. And to be honest, this actually probably will be a very early shrine that we fetch up once we get Sanctum of All online. But I don't think counting on getting Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest into play is going to make sense as part of our game plan getting up to Sanctum of All. The biggest reason for that is if we were to plan on hitting this on turn 3 or potentially 2 if we have a 1-drop accelerator. If we can get it down that early, great. But I don't want to put 4 of these in the deck, because once we have it online, it's worth almost nothing. In our hand, a second Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest early in the game is just a dead card, and it feels really bad. That said, we can chuck it to Sanctum of Shattered Heights, so it's not nothing. Like, we can use it, which is one of the nice things about Sanctum of Shattered Heights, but at the same time, how much do we want to depend on Sanctum of Shattered Heights? That's one of those where that is a very limited interaction and very limited value, and I feel like we can get better value with other cards that are going to be more consistent in various phases of the game. So that's my reasoning behind only putting 1 Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest. If we hit it, great. If we don't, that's fine. We're going to be all right. Especially given how much ramp right now is insane. So there's a lot of great ramp options. We don't need this one. Then Haunted of Life's Web. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token for each shrine you control. That is an alternate win condition that actually could be really, really handy. And it creates chump blockers for us. So going up against the goblin decks, that'll give us an army that can absorb some of the heat so that our face doesn't. That's great. I love that. That's really important. And again, another one that we might end up fetching fairly early with Sanctum of All. But I don't know if we need more than 1. Now, something we could do with this deck that's kind of fun and interesting, we could actually put different Sanctums, or different Sanctums, different Handens into the sideboard. That way we can change the ratios depending on what we're going up against. So actually, that's something I'm gonna go ahead and do that right now. So our tech against aggro, we could put in 2 additional Honden of Infinite Rage, 2 additional Sanctum of Shattered Heights. That way, we're more likely to be dealing a lot more damage in the early game than we would otherwise. That's pretty cool. That can give us a nice option, or a nice little bonus there. Same thing with Honden of Cleansing Fire, potentially. Potentially, I don't know. Life gain is good to a point. I don't want to depend on life gain, especially when we have Sanctum of Stone Fangs available to us. I feel like that is going to be, because it gives us half as much life, but it sucks it from our opponent. So you actually get the same amount of swing with Sanctum of Stone Fangs as you do with the Honden of Cleansing Fire. However, it costs half the mana to do it, and because the life swing is also it is hurting your opponent, it brings the end of the game closer. And that's in a good way. So, all right. So let's talk interactions. So we do have to worry about goblins. And so I did mention Containment Priest. She's very, very powerful. She's a 2/2 flash for 2. If a non-token creature would enter the battlefield and it wasn't cast, exile it instead. I'm going to go ahead and tuck Containment Priest into our sideboard. She's going to be very, very valuable against not only goblins, but also Winota, if we find ourselves going up against those. That matchup. Also, anything with Transmogrify or Luca. And there's actually a lot of stuff going on right now where people are Luca-ing tokens, and going to grab like Crater of Behemoth and closing out the game that way. Containment Priest completely shuts that down, just hard and fast. So I'm going to go ahead and put 4 Containment Priests in the sideboard, because when we need them, we need them. And so I think 4 is a fair amount. I don't want to have any in the main board just yet, because they run the risk of being just a 2-cost chump blocker. Which I guess actually you could do a lot worse than a 2-cost chump blocker. So we'll put them in the sideboard for now. We may end up pulling her into the main board later. Although, in thinking about the ramp package, let's go ahead and, talk about the elephant in the room, or the titan in the room, as it were. We have Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. This card is phenomenal. It's absolutely, it's the best. Full stop. As far as ramp goes, Uro's amazing. You draw cards, you gain life, and you put lands from your hand onto the battlefield. So it ramps you. Yeah, you draw ramp, and once it's late in the game and you have a graveyard, you can escape it, and you then have a 6/6 that continues to draw you cards, gain you life, and ramp you. So I feel like Uro is phenomenal, hands down, no question. So let's go ahead and put Uro in here. The other thing that I'm thinking about, because I have a really strong soft spot for Mutate, and so one of the things we could do here, you know what? Actually, I'm going to do something crazy. Let's take Cultivate out. Let's take Uro out for now. Now, Uro's phenomenal. We're probably going to slot Uro back in. We just are. So when I say that I have a soft spot for Mutate, I love Mutate. I think Mutate is one of the most underrated mechanics out there. It's incredibly powerful when it gets to work. So the biggest thing is, are we going to see board wipes? Hondens are the name of the game. We're ultimately trying to get to the Hondens. And so all of our creatures that we have, if we have any creatures, so that's the thing. We can go a couple of different ways. We could go all removal control and just draw cards and wipe the board so that no creatures are allowed to survive, and just Scorched Earth every turn with things like Shatter the Sky, Time Wipe, maybe Kaya's Ghost Form, although the casting restriction on that's a little bit dicey, but we could do it that way, where we could just wipe the board constantly and just eliminate our opponent's opportunities to have any creatures down. That is very, very powerful. That is very, that could work. We could also have Planeswalker support. That is another thing that I've seen some decks do, where they have Calyx, for example. Actually, I went up against a Shrine deck running this guy, and what they were able to do is the -3 with Calyx and Shrines down is actually really devastating, because you get to just remove any permanent, basically. So the creature or enchantment, and it turns one of your shrines into a Banishing Light. So you don't have to have a Banishing Light, but you do get that effect of having a Banishing Light. So it's a perfect removal spell. And his +1, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an enchantment card from among them. Put that card into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So if you're not able to get your Sanctum of All online and you need to just dig for it, he allows that. So for 1 additional mana, you get the Banishing Light effect, plus you get the ability to tutor up. Well, not necessarily tutor, but you get the opportunity to draw into those other enchantments that you need. So Calyx is really good here. No question. He's just really good. And if you actually work up to his -7, return all enchantment cards from the graveyard to the battlefield. So if somebody finds a way, like if somebody Heliod interventions all over your shrines and actually manages to blow them all up, if you can get to ulting Calyx, you just get them all back. And there's no, like, I don't think people can come back from that at this point. So you know what? I'm going to go ahead and throw one Calyx in here, because if we can hit him, great. Again, it's another one of those situations where if we can get it, awesome. If we can't, that's okay. We'll live. And so then the other thing there is, Shatter the Sky is just an incredibly, just a killer board wipe. But I did mention that I love Mutate. I'm incredibly fond of Mutate. And so if we are going to ramp without creatures, so if we're going to use spells like Cultivate, like Uro, then now that Growth Spiral has Growth Spiral been historic? I don't remember, to be honest. No, it's not actually. So we could run Growth Spiral and Uro. That's about as good a ramp situation as you're going to get. I was thinking Gilded Goose. So as far as ramping goes, Gilded Goose on 1 would be fantastic. So let's go ahead and put four geese in there. The other one that could be really nice is our Boreal Grazer. That is a little 1-mana dork that's just really, really good again. And actually, it's not a mana dork, but it's another 1-drop, which is just excellent. But ultimately, what do we want to ramp up into? We want to ramp into our shrines. That's first and foremost. But there's a part of me that's wanting to pull off. So here's my thought. Migratory Greathorn is a Mutate Cultivate. So if we can hit a Migratory Greathorn, so actually let's go ahead and, I'm going to go ahead and forego Grazer. I'm going to put 3 Migratory Greathorn in and stick with me here. So we got Migratory Greathorn, which we're going to be, I'm going to go ahead and group these. So we've got our ramp package chilling over here. So we can hit Gilded Goose on 1, mutate a Migratory Greathorn onto it on turn 2. Perfect situation. And then, here's what I'm thinking. Auspicious Sterix. Whenever this creature mutates, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile X permanent cards, where X is the number of times this creature has mutated. Put those permanent cards onto the battlefield. Actually, you know what? Okay, so my thought was, if we can hit a Sterix and get a ton of shrines, that would be a really explosive turn that would be really freaking sweet to see. Now, I'm not saying that's impossible, but I'm realizing in order to get the max value out of that, we're going to have to build up a mutate stack over a while, and we're going to have to invest a lot of cards into that in order to hit this a couple of times. And so I feel like we need to really be going all in on Mutate, in which case we don't have that many shrines, which now that I look at that, now that I really think about it, that isn't going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and table that. Now, there is another option, another mutator that allows us to cheat stuff in, and that's Aluna, Apex of Wishes. So Aluna, whenever this creature mutates, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land permanent card. Put that card onto the battlefield or into your hand. So Aluna would straight up give us, so for 6, Aluna, or Ghidorah, as we see here, is going to give us at least 1 shrine. At least 1 shrine, basically, or potentially one of our mana dorks, which I guess could, maybe not ideal, but you could do a lot worse. So let's go ahead and let's get the Migratory Greathorn out of there. I think Gilded Goose is still solid. Let's go ahead and throw 1 Aluna in, just 1. We don't need to go crazy with it. I don't believe Aluna is going to be like part of the game plan, but it's a cool way to potentially accelerate our strategy. So let's get Aluna in there, and then Paradise Druid is another phenomenal mana dork. All right, so another phenomenal mana dork that can produce mana of any color. So let's go ahead and throw Paradise Druid in there. And Gift of Paradise, add 2 mana of any 1 color. That's fine, I suppose. The other one that, we're going to have some creatures on the board. So we're accepting that we are going to have mana dorks on the field. It's going to be part of the deal. And so, you know what? I think we do need to accept that Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, is just way too freaking good to not have in this deck. So let's go ahead and just accept it. Let's go for it. Let's throw in Uro. I want this deck to work. So let's go ahead and have the best and the biggest and baddest. All right. And so with that, we now need to set up our mana base. So here, let's see. As far as interactions go, we actually don't have that much. We're fully depending on our shrines to destroy our opponent's creatures and draw us more cards. That's going to be that's really what we're aiming for. We have a couple of explosive options, but we're not gonna. I mean, they're potentials. We might escape Uro. We might mutate a Luna. We might drop Calyx. Like, those are like fringe situations. Those are like ideal top enders. But in the end of the day, game plan number one, biggest thing we need to have happen is we need to ramp with a lot of different mana options and get Sanctum of All down. Period. End of discussion. That is what needs to happen. So, what can we do to help us get there? Mana-wise, just what do we need? First things first, whenever I'm building a mana base on Arena, what I like to do, and I know I've said this before, but I'll say it again, it's just part of the deal. I go to the lands, I select the colors that we're looking for. So specifically, I'm worried about blue and I'm worried about green. Primarily green because, as you can see, our early mana dorks are all green, and Uro depends on green. So we clearly need green. But I also want to make sure we have blue because the shrines that we're going to be counting on to draw us more cards require blue mana, and Uro requires blue mana. So I want to make sure that those are both represented. Now, the next thing I do, now you'll notice when you select the colors, you see all the basics first. I always check this multicolor because then we're just looking at duels. Now, in Historic, we have access to the check lands, I believe they're referred to as, where it checks whether or not you have a forest or an island, and then it comes into play. Is it check land or buddy lands? I think they might be the buddy lands. Anyway, I'm getting the lingo confused. But we have cards that if you have a forest or an island already in play, they come in untapped. That's really powerful. Those are really freaking good. I personally don't have as many of them as I'd want, but c'est la vie, it is what it is. But we do have access to the shock lands and the temples. Now, I don't want a ton of temples because them coming into play tapped is a real detriment. But I'm going to go ahead and grab 2 Temple of Mystery, just because those are in the colors that we specifically need. The other element that I want to look at are the Trioms. Now, I don't want to go crazy with the Trioms because they also come into play tapped. However, all the Trioms that have green and, well, there are only 2 Trioms that have both green and blue in them, Ketria and Zagoth, which are the Temur and Sultai colors. I feel like getting those in here could be valuable because we do need access to, so that's going to give us green and black, green and blue, which, well, I mean, those are the most foundational colors to what we're building. But one also gives us access to red. Now, our early shrines, so Ketria, our early shrines are going to be our red. So we have some early red shrines, so that makes sense. And then the Zagoth Triome gives us access to black. Sanctum of Stonefangs is an early play that we're going to want to hit most games. So sneaking in black mana and red mana earlier than some of the other colors is great for us. At the end of the day, we want to hit all of them. We just do. But, it's okay if, we can fudge things a little bit. We'll be all right. But the biggest thing, red and black, very important for us. All right. So what else? We do have 1 Shatter the Sky, and I'm wondering if it would make sense to actually tweak some levels for some of the other shrines and get a second Shatter in there. Actually, at the very least, we should put Shatters in the sideboard. So let me go ahead and load up and put 2 more in the sideboard. So now we've got 2 in there. We've got Containment Priest, and yeah, this is actually going to be pretty righteous against aggro, and I think the deck itself is going to be pretty good against a lot of mid-range strategies. So actually, you know what? The one card that I do want to get my hands on, if we're going up against a control matchup, is Thought Distortion. This thing is so mean. It's the meanest. It doesn't get meaner than this thing. So let's go ahead and, let's throw 4 of them in there, because if we're going up against a heavy control player, Thought Distortion wrecks them. So if you're not familiar, the spell cannot be countered. Just that alone right there. You just cast, it's a sorcery for 6, 2 of which has to be black. Target opponent reveals their hand, exile all non-creature, non-land cards from that player's hand and graveyard. So that eliminates all their enchantments. So Elspeth Conquers Death, Elspeth's Nightmare, any of that jazz, all that's gone. And then also any planeswalkers that they have. So if next turn they're going to throw Ugin and they're feeling super spicy about it, nope, get that out of here. So Thought Distortion is super duper valuable. Now, it's funny actually, because I'm looking at what we've got going here, and with the exception of the Hondens, all of this is standard legal. Now, part of that is because I'm familiar with standard. It's the meta that I know better than historic. So that's a factor, and I'll be fully transparent and upfront about that. But also, standard right now is super duper powerful, so why not? The other option that I can think of that we could slot in here just to make it more historic is Llanowar elves in place of Gilded Goose potentially, but that produces only green mana, so that would feel, I don't know. I don't feel good about that. All right. So let's see. And you know what? Let's go ahead and actually throw. In looking at the Hondens, I want to go ahead and throw a Honden of Life's Web in the sideboard, so we can just dial that up if we want to. Actually, you know what? No, let's throw a second Calyx in the sideboard. Because, again, in a matchup where our opponent has, like, one big threat late in the game, Calyx's -3 can be really, really powerful. And in a game where we have breathing room, getting a Planeswalker down that can deal with some of that stuff is pretty nice. Now, the other thing... Okay, so here's my thought. I'm looking at Gilded Goose, and I'm wondering, okay, do I want the Goose in there? Biggest thing about the Goose is it's more or less a one-shot. You know, you get the mana once because you create the food once, and we don't have any other food synergies in here, so we're not going to be creating additional food tokens that the Goose can use. So, does it make sense for Gilded Goose to be our mana dork? To be our one-drop? Or would it make more sense for us to put Arboreal Grazer into the mix? Now, Arboreal Grazer is very good. No question about it. It is it's rock solid at what it does. However, if you're going to be running Arboreal Grazer, you need to be able to hit extra land drops. We're already going to be hitting extra land drops with Uro. And we're running 24 lands right now, which is kind of the default in most 60-card decks. Well, it is the default on Arena, and I know for me personally, that's the number I always start with when I'm building a 60-card deck. So, it makes sense. And I don't know. I don't believe it would make sense for us to increase the mana base, increase the number of lands just so that we can throw Arboreal Grazer rather than Gilded Goose. I don't believe the return on that investment is going to be there. Instead, I want to be able to invest the slots in our deck on the shrines that we're trying to get into play. I think that's really where we want those card slots to be. So to be honest, cards like a Luna, and I mean the one Shadow the Sky that we have in here, I'm pretty confident is going to be useful. Paradise Druid is really the only thing that I'm concerned about losing to a Shadow the Sky, and Paradise Druid is not going to be blocking anything. So and actually the nice thing about the Goose is once we've used the Goose once, yes, we can reload it by paying 2 and creating another food token if our mana lines up that way. But if our mana does line up that way, we're in trouble. After we've used the one food token, this is basically just a chump blocker, which is fine actually. Sometimes you really just need a flying chump blocker, but at the same time, if we end up having to hit a Shadow the Sky to wipe out the goblins that are across the table from us, I don't care if we lose the Goose. And losing Paradise Druid will probably be a minor bummer, but hey, if that's what we need to do to survive, I'll do it, and that'll be fine. All right, so now we need to look at... Okay, so we need to finish our mana base. I got a little distracted there. So the next up, a lot of our removal is centered around white. So we have green represented, we have blue represented, we have some red in the Trioms, as well as some black in the Trioms. So actually, right now, we've got pretty much everything except white represented, which is why the the automatic suggest lands is putting a whole bunch of planes in there. Well, so let's go ahead and grab white and green, because again, green is such a clutch, important color. We want as much of it as we can get our hands on. So let's go ahead and take Temple Garden, which is the shock land in Selesnya colors. Let's go ahead and throw 4 Temple Gardens in there. I feel like that's kind of a no-brainer. The other thing that we're not running here is Fabled Passage. Now, Fabled Passage would make a lot of sense if we were going the Arboreal Grazer route where we wanted a lot of lands. The problem with Fabled Passages, it can only fetch up basics. So if you're running 4 Fabled Passages, you better have at least 8 or 9 basics in the deck. Otherwise, you're going to run out of them, and Fabled Passage is going to be a dead draw, and that is going to suck. And I don't like it when things suck, so let's not do that. All right. The other thing, I'm tempted to throw in some a Temple of Plenty. Let's go ahead and put 1 in. Because again, I don't want a ton of temples. The temples in the Triomes, they are a risky business because they come into play tapped. Now, if we can hit them on Uro drops, great. Nothing wrong with that. Because in all likelihood, if we've tapped 3 to play Uro, then we're probably going to be tapping out for that anyway. And so a land coming in tapped that we wouldn't be able to use otherwise, regardless, Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so that's not bad. Then let's see. So let's go ahead and go grab the other green shock lands. I think that's really where the money is. So let's go ahead and we grab Overgrown Tomb, we grab Stomping Grounds, and just like that, we have actually exceeded the number of lands that we were allowed in this deck. So I guess we have the question: does 24 make sense? Is 24 the right number, or should we have more? We are going to be hitting extra land drops with Uro. Gilded Goose and Paradise Druid are going to be ramping us by producing additional non-land mana. So that's okay, I guess. And we're going to be drawing plenty of cards. So having too many lands in our hand might actually be to our detriment. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and take that Temple of Plenty out. I wasn't feeling super jazzed about it anyway, if I'm completely honest, because if we only have one card in our opening hand, I want it to come in untapped so we can hit a goose. I really want to be able to hit a Gilded Goose on turn 1. I think that's really important. If we can't hit a Gilded Goose on turn 1, I'm going to mulligan that hand. And as you can see, the shock lands that we have all have green in them. And so all of the lands that come into play untapped in this deck, of which there are 16, all of them come in with... Can come in with green mana available. That's really important. I think that's clutch. So then we have the Trioms, which I believe are pretty good fixing. They do good work. The Temple of Mystery, to be honest, the more I look at it, the more I think that maybe we don't get that much value out of that. We're not getting a ton of fixing from it. I'd rather have a breeding pool every day. And to be honest, the Trioms give us more versatility in our mana base. All right. So you know what? I think we got it. Because at the end of the day, Paradise Druid and Gilded Goose are going to help us fix our mana. We've got the Shocklands. We've got some Trioms that can help smooth out some of the rough edges. The only color that's not represented in the Ooh, you know what? Just kidding. Nope, we don't. We don't have it yet. Because the Temple Garden is the only land that can produce white mana. And we have a lot of white in the sideboard. So we have a lot of white in the sideboard. We in Shadow of the Sky, Containment Priest, additional Calyx. And then we might also be depending on that Shadow of the Sky on turn 4. And if we can't hit a Shadow of the Sky on turn 4, we're in rough shape. So I want to be able to count on that. And actually, I couldn't help but notice, right in front of me, there is a cycle that got introduced with Jumpstart, called the Thriving Cycle. And so you can see here we have Thriving Heath. It enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, choose a color other than white. In the case of Thriving Heath, it is a white mana producer, and you get to name a second color. It's a dual land that comes into play tapped, and you get to pick what the second color is. Now, this is a common from Jumpstart, and so I think a lot of people are going to be sleeping on these. I think most people are going to assume these are terrible. And to be honest, in most decks, they are not very good. In a 2-color deck, they are terrible. Every other dual land is going to be better. Heck, I would rather have the little life gain duels if we're in a 2-color, or even most 3-color decks. And those life gain duels are like unplayable. Windscarred Crag and whatnot. Like, don't touch those. They're not worth it. Unless you have life gain synergies in your deck, of which I do have some. But anyway. However, in a 5-color deck, the second color that we might need off one of these lands is going to be different from game to game. That's important. Like, that's something to keep in mind. So all of a sudden, I feel like, let's go ahead and, I believe it's Thriving Grove. The green Thriving land. It produces green. It does come onto the battlefield tapped, which is a little bit of a feel bad, not going to lie. However, it can produce white mana for us if that's what we need in the moment. But it could also produce any other color if that's what we need in that game. So, you know what? I'm actually going to throw 4 Thriving Groves in here. I'm going to do it. That's kind of a risky situation, yeah, you could argue that's not a super great call, but I'm going to stick by it. And I'm going to go ahead and take out, actually, you know what? I was originally thinking about taking out the Overgrown Tombs and the Stomping Grounds, or taking 2 of each, but now the more I think about it, the more I realize I actually want to keep those in there, because they come into play untapped. And I would rather actually shave down our Trioms. So in place of... So the Trioms do give us access to 3 colors, which is going to be more versatile for most games. However, green and blue are the ones that we're really trying to get off here. And you'll notice we have green in all of them. Actually, it might make sense for us to grab the blue thriving land, because we could turn it green if we needed to, but otherwise it could be blue. So it could be blue regardless, because all of our shocks produce green. You know what? I'm going to do that. Nope. All right. And so here's kind of the thought process when crafting a mana base. Like, what are we ultimately trying to do? And, I'm looking at these and thinking that this might be the one situation where the thriving lands are actually useful outside of the Jumpstart limited environment. I could be wrong. I could be on this one, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to play it out and see how they play, because I think there might be something there that might actually work. Now, I would the biggest thing, I want to make sure that I can hit a Sanctum of All on turn 5. Okay, I've kind of gotten away from that. That is what this deck is trying to do. I want to be able to hit a Sanctum of All, ideally on like turn 3. In reality, probably turn 4. Turn 4 or 5. I want to be able to hit Sanctum of All and just survive long enough to do that, and then just get a ton of other shrines. That's really what we need to do. Bottom line, that's what this deck does, and that's what this deck needs to do. However, Thriving Isle can help us get there. Thriving Isle can help us do that, because if we have 4 lands down and we have every color represented except black, just for whatever reason, that's just how it has lined up, then all of a sudden our Thriving Isle, we can just slap it down, boom, it now produces black. Great. Doesn't matter what we draw. I don't need to draw a specific type of land. We have it now. And so once we untap, we're good to go. So sequencing the lands with this deck is going to be critical. I cannot say that enough. And you know what? The more I realize, the more I look at it, the more I think that actually Ghidorah is still a 6/6 flying trampler for 5. Never mind, actually, that card's just so freaking awesome. All right, so I was thinking about pulling a Luna out of here, but I'm thinking the more I look at it, the more I realize the mana fixing to get her down, even if we don't mutate. I assume it's a she. I could be wrong. Yeah. Anyway, so never mind. I was considering pulling that out in favor of one more land to bump us up to 25, because 24 is pretty slim. But I'm feeling good about this. Yeah, I'm feeling really good about this, actually. I think we could do something here. Actually, you know what? In place of the Paradise Druid, we might actually throw Growth Spiral. You know what? Let's do that. So I'll keep the Goose, because the Goose does provide fixing for us. Actually, no. Check that. Paradise Druid produces mana of any color, as does Gilded Goose. We are going to get the majority of our mana fixing off of these 2 dorks. And that's really, really important. Mana dork, by the way, is a colloquialism that a lot of people use. I'm not just, disparaging these 2 cards. Yeah, so this is the first draft. Every time you build a brand new deck from scratch, the first draft is a first draft. Play it out, try it, test it, see what works, see what doesn't. There are going to be certain cards that overperform and certain cards that underperform. And I have no doubt that once I actually get into a game with these shrines, there are going to be certain ones that I'm just super jazzed to see every single time. And my takeaway is going to be, okay, put more of those in the deck. And that's okay. You discover those as you play. There's no way around it. That just is how it works. And that's perfectly fine. If you want to see me actually play this deck and tune it up, twitch.tv/hamhawks42. I played this as well as all the other decks that we've built on the Rogue Deck Workshop, plus a whole bunch that I've actually built on stream, because I cannot get enough of deck building. I can't. It's my favorite thing. And if you enjoy deck building too, come do it with me. Come hang out. If you have any crazy ideas for decks, please let me know. Please don't hesitate to, throw them into the chat. I also am on Discord. I have a really active Discord community where we talk about crazy deck ideas. And we also have a lot of folks who have been building custom cards, which is super duper fun. So come check that out. There's a link in the description below. Yeah, and I look forward to seeing you over there. I look forward to seeing you on the stream. Thank you for spending some time with me here today. I appreciate it. I hope you're having a good one and staying safe out there. And I look forward to catching you next time.